Westminster was rocked to its core today by an utterly unforeseen and seismic event. In a truly historic and astonishing moment, Nigel Farage took to the floor of the National Assembly and formally initiated a motion of no confidence against Prime Minister Kier Starmer. Yet, this was merely the prelude to a political earthquake that would send shockwaves through the very foundations of British politics. In a move that left the entire chamber stunned, Mr. Farage began to expose a staggering $300 million corruption scandal, a revelation that now threatens to bring down the Labour Party entirely. With a resounding thud, he slammed a thick folder onto his desk, emblazoned with the words, "Confidential Counsel Fraud Investigation." In that instant, the very air in the room shifted, transforming the atmosphere from a routine political debate into an undeniable crisis. A hush fell, absolute and profound. Members of Parliament leaned forward, their faces etched with disbelief and anticipation. Reporters in the press gallery scrambled, their pens poised, their fingers flying across keyboards. This, it became immediately clear, was no mere political theatre, it was a reckoning. With a laser-like focus, Mr. Farage meticulously laid out his case. Over $300 million of hard-working British taxpayers' money, he alleged, had been systematically siphoned from local councils, all directly under the watch of Mr. Starmer's Labour government. And this, he emphatically stated, was no simple clerical error. Mr. Farage gravely accused the government of a deliberate and orchestrated act of corruption, one that he warned could shatter the public's trust beyond repair. The alleged corruption, he explained, had been cleverly masked by intricate layers of bureaucracy, disguised as legitimate, community investment schemes. However, these projects, Mr. Farage asserted, were nothing more than a charade. He went on to expose a shocking litany of deceptions, ghost contracts, fictitious consultancy firms, lavish overseas research trips that yielded nothing, training programs that were cancelled but still billed for, and empty construction sites that nonetheless continued to gobble up millions in taxpayer funds. With each page he turned, revealing more damning evidence, the chamber remained frozen, captivated by the unfolding scandal. Every new detail unveiled yet another layer of deceit. At the very epicenter of this maelstrom sat Kier Starmer himself, silent, visibly pale, his gaze seemingly lost in the distance. But Mr. Farage wasn't finished. He went on to accuse Labour councils of not just squandering public money, but, more chillingly, of weaponising it. The $300 million, he claimed, was not spent randomly. Instead, it was allegedly funneled into a covert operation, meticulously preparing for a large-scale expansion of immigration. Rather than funding essential services like repairing crumbling roads or reopening beloved local libraries, these funds, he asserted, were illicitly used to construct housing specifically for incoming migrants. All of this, he stressed, was kept entirely secret from the British public. His claims were, he insisted, supported by council records, photographic evidence, and compelling testimonies from whistleblowers. These, he said, revealed luxury flats appearing in small towns, falsely labelled as regeneration projects, all designed to hide the true, vast scale of this operation. These so-called regeneration projects, he concluded, were quietly repurposed into migrant housing, while British citizens in those very same communities remained trapped on endless housing waiting lists, forced to watch their own neighbourhoods visibly deteriorate. Mr. Farage, with a voice ringing with conviction, branded the alleged scheme, the Great Betrayal. For once, the usually boisterous chamber remained utterly silent, hanging on his every word. This isn't merely about wasted money, he declared, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of the MPs, it is, unequivocally, about the betrayal of the British people. He lambasted Prime Minister Starmer, asserting that despite promises of integrity, he had instead filled his friends' pockets, bankrupted our councils, and abandoned working-class communities across the land. Labour MPs sat rigid, seemingly frozen in their seats, while Conservative and Reform members appeared a mix of stunned disbelief and quiet vindication. In the press gallery, a frenzy erupted, a whirlwind of hushed whispers, urgent phone calls, and the rapid clatter of keyboards. This was no ordinary political skirmish, it was a direct hit, a knockout blow delivered with devastating precision. Mr. Farage continued to lay bare the evidence, damning invoices, internal council emails, photographs of abandoned projects that had swallowed millions, and cancelled contracts that revealed the scale of the deceit. The weight of the evidence, he argued, pointed to one inescapable conclusion: this was no simple error, but a well-coordinated and systemic scheme that had unfolded directly under Mr. Starmer's leadership, or perhaps even with his explicit approval. He warned ominously that the scandal could run even deeper, suggesting that this was merely the beginning of a much larger rot. He went on to expose what he claimed were deeper ties, linking Labour MPs directly to private contractors, hinting at secret backroom deals with foreign investors, and accusing the government of calculated moves that brazenly prioritised political gain over the welfare of the very public they were sworn to serve. This money wasn't lost, he stated sharply, his voice cutting through the tension. It was redirected to fund a secret immigration policy that the public never voted for, never approved, and indeed, never even knew existed. The true gravity of the moment became undeniably clear. This was not just another political scandal, it was a full-scale national crisis. Across Britain, public outrage exploded. From the bustling streets of Manchester to the heart of Birmingham, angry citizens immediately began to demand answers. Protests swelled, members' offices were inundated with letters and calls, and voices demanding Mr. Starmer's immediate resignation multiplied at a staggering pace. The Prime Minister himself, once seen as a steady and unflappable leader, sat utterly frozen throughout Mr. Farage's speech. For the first time in his career, Mr. Starmer appeared to have no defense, no carefully crafted spin, no outright denial. Only silence. And that silence was deafening. The motion of no confidence has now been formally introduced, and Parliament stands poised on the brink of an historic political upheaval. Our elected representatives now face a defining choice, to stand with the truth, or to protect the alleged corruption. This, Mr. Farage implored, was no longer about rigid party lines, it was about the very soul of Britain. As Mr. Farage delivered his final, powerful words, the chamber was electric with tension. This scandal isn't just the downfall of a government, he declared, his voice resonating with conviction. It's the collapse of a lie, and the beginning of truth. The days ahead promise to be among the most pivotal in modern British history. The real question, it seems, is no longer whether Kier Starmer can survive politically. It is whether the British people will ever trust him again. British politics is now in absolute turmoil. In a truly shocking address that left the National Assembly utterly stunned, Nigel Farage exposed a secret scheme, allegedly led by Labour-run councils, to construct thousands of new flats, not for struggling British families languishing on housing lists, but for undocumented migrants reportedly pouring into the UK. The revelation struck like a thunderclap, silencing the entire chamber. These weren't homes for those stuck on housing lists, Mr. Farage revealed, his voice laced with indignation. They were developments disguised as affordable housing and community projects, meticulously designed to hide the truth from the very people footing the bill. Mr. Farage exposed what he termed a betrayal hidden behind the benign term regeneration. In stark reality, he claimed, Labour-run councils were quietly building housing for undocumented migrants who had arrived, without consent, without screening, and without public knowledge. These highly secretive plans, he stressed, had never reached Parliament or the taxpayers, instead being buried under vague project names within confidential council files. Whistleblowers, some reportedly from Labour councils themselves, revealed that migrants, including those from Calais and beyond, were being prioritised. Meanwhile, Mr. Farage continued, his voice echoing through the hallowed halls of Parliament, working-class British families face soaring rents, our cherished pensioners are being evicted from care homes, and our young people are left waiting years for even the chance of affordable housing. Yet, contractors are lining their pockets, constructing homes for people who have never contributed a penny to our system. This is a betrayal of the British people, he thundered, his words reverberating with righteous anger. Labour has sold out our cities, our vital services, and our communities, all for votes. He went on to accuse Kier Starmer of orchestrating a deliberate plan to reshape Britain's very future, of purposefully flooding the country with migrants to secure a loyal voting bloc, while hard-working British citizens were callously left behind, struggling to survive in their own homeland. This, Farage declared, his voice rising to a crescendo, is the great replacement unfolding before our very eyes. Paid for by British taxpayers, concealed by Labour councils, and authorised by Kier Starmer himself. To underscore his grave accusations, Mr. Farage then presented council invoices, revealing millions allegedly spent on integration services, language programs, and multicultural outreach, all, he insisted, designed solely to accommodate undocumented migrants with no discernible benefit to British citizens. As Labour, he claimed, quietly expanded this insidious scheme, the consequences for ordinary people across the country grew increasingly severe. Food banks, once a last resort, couldn't keep up with the overwhelming demand. Job cuts hit hard, leaving families destitute. NHS waiting lists stretched endlessly, becoming a national shame, and councils across the UK began to declare bankruptcy at an alarming rate. Birmingham, Britain's second-largest city, became the clearest and most tragic example, officially declared bankrupt. Its council tax was hiked mercilessly while vital public services were brutally gutted. Yet, inexplicably, Labour-linked developers continued to construct new housing estates, not for struggling locals, but for thousands of undocumented migrants. Mr. Farage highlighted the heartbreaking reality of pensioners in Birmingham being evicted from care homes due to a shocking lack of funds, while money freely flowed into Labour's hidden housing programme. This isn't mismanagement, Farage warned, his voice sharp with condemnation. This is deliberate, calculated, cold-blooded betrayal at the highest level. And, he made it abundantly clear, he wasn't finished yet. With a final, dramatic flourish, Mr. Farage raised one last document, labelled, strictly confidential, and read aloud a chilling email exchange between senior Labour Council officials and private developers. The email openly discussed new housing developments specifically planned for a high volume of migrant arrivals expected in the fourth quarter. This is the evidence, Farage declared, his voice booming. They knew. They orchestrated it. And they kept it hidden from the British people. The chamber erupted instantly. Gasps, shouts of outrage, and cries of disbelief filled the air. Some Labour MPs visibly hung their heads in shame, their faces a picture of profound discomfort. Others, unable to bear the weight of the revelations, silently, discreetly, left the room. In that single, shattering moment, public trust in the government collapsed. Mr. Farage powerfully emphasized that this wasn't merely about $300 million in taxpayer funds being misused. It was, he passionately argued, about the calculated dismantling of public services, the breakdown of national unity, and the sacrifice of everyday Britain to serve Labour's cynical political ambitions. He issued a grim warning. Birmingham, he stated, was merely the first domino to fall. Manchester had already frozen non-essential spending. Nottingham was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, and cities like Leeds and Sheffield were issuing eerily similar financial warnings. The crisis, he stressed, was rapidly spreading nationwide. Bristol and countless towns across Britain now face imminent financial collapse. Even seemingly tranquil rural areas like Darlington and Shrewsbury, he noted, were reporting crises linked to mysterious regeneration spending. The pattern, he concluded, was chillingly consistent. Libraries closed, youth centres shuttered, food banks overwhelmed, while new apartment blocks continued to rise, built for people who, he underscored, have never lived or worked in Britain. As Parliament convulsed, public anger boiled over. Protests are breaking out in Birmingham and Manchester, with furious residents rallying outside council offices, holding signs defiantly reading, "Where is our money?" and "British homes for British families." In Leeds, angry voters have been seen confronting a Labour councillor, vociferously demanding answers. Outside Parliament, thousands now gather daily, nurses, veterans, workers, chanting in unison, "Resign." Snap election now. Inside Westminster, chaos reigns. Labour MPs are in open revolt, with backbenchers reportedly debating whether to remove Mr. Starmer themselves in a desperate attempt to protect their own seats. The Speaker has called emergency sessions. Senior Conservatives are already preparing for a snap election. And even some Liberal Democrat and Scottish National Party members, once among Mr. Farage's fiercest critics, privately beginning to admit that he may, astonishingly, have been right all along. Whispers within Labour circles suggest that even some of Mr. Starmer's closest allies are now privately conceding that he might no longer be fit to govern. Yet, through the escalating storm, Kier Starmer remained inexplicably silent. No hastily called press conference, no defiant statement, no semblance of a defense. The entire country waited, simmering with fury, feeling utterly betrayed, and no longer willing to be ignored. Inside Labour Party headquarters, panic had spread like wildfire. According to anonymous leaks from within, senior staff members had immediately grasped the catastrophic gravity of the situation. "It's over," one insider reportedly confessed, in a chilling admission. "Farage has the proof. Councils are collapsing. The public is turning. We simply cannot survive this." This palpable fear rapidly infected every level of the party. Major donors, sensing the impending doom, began to withdraw their crucial financial support, and the party's polling numbers crashed catastrophically. Within mere hours, almost 70% of voters declared they no longer trusted Mr. Starmer to lead the country. In Labour's traditional heartlands, the North and the Midlands, support plummeted to historic and devastating lows. But this crisis, it quickly became apparent, was far bigger than mere politics. The $300 million housing scandal began to bleed directly into the daily lives of ordinary Britons. Local businesses, many dependent on council contracts, found them withdrawn overnight. NHS clinics, vital pillars of community health, faced closure as council-funded health partnerships collapsed. And police forces, reliant on community safety grants, issued stark warnings of reduced patrols, leaving already vulnerable streets even more dangerous and exposed. Meanwhile, the very developers who had allegedly profited handsomely from Labour's secret migrant housing schemes, many of whom were closely tied to the party, seemingly vanished with their ill-gotten gains, leaving behind a trail of half-finished estates and abandoned projects. In working-class towns like Rotherham and Stoke, resentment boiled over into open anger. One elderly gentleman, waving a worn, faded Labour membership card, perfectly encapsulated the fury. "We trusted Labour for 50 years. Never again. They sold us out for migrants and money." In coastal areas heavily impacted by the migrant influx, local fishermen gathered outside council offices, their voices united in a powerful chant, "Farage was right. Farage was right." Online, Mr. Farage's explosive speech went viral, racking up millions of views and swiftly pushing national sentiment from mere frustration to outright, incandescent rage. Inside Westminster, the pressure was immense, almost unbearable. Parliament itself trembled as the critical, defining question hung heavy in the air: would Kier Starmer choose to step down gracefully before facing an inevitable vote of no confidence? Or would panicked Labour MPs make the first move, attempting to remove him themselves in a desperate, last-ditch effort to salvage what little remained of their beleaguered party? At Downing Street, advisers huddled late into the night, their faces grim, desperately exploring every conceivable option. But all paths, they realized with dawning horror, led to one inescapable conclusion: political collapse was now inevitable. Outside, the British public had already unequivocally made up their minds. They demanded justice, they demanded answers, and most powerfully of all, they demanded Mr. Starmer's immediate resignation. What had begun as a $300 million housing scandal had mushroomed into a nationwide crisis, fundamentally threatening public trust, the very concept of leadership, and the future of the Labour Party itself. As dawn broke over Westminster, painting the sky with the promise of a new, uncertain day, the entire country held its breath. Inside Parliament, the motion of no confidence lay waiting, a potent political weapon resting in every member of Parliament's hand. Farage stood resolute, unshaken by the momentous occasion. His voice, clear and powerful, rang out across the chamber: $300 million stolen from the British people, councils bankrupt, British families abandoned while foreign interests grew rich. Starmer knew. Starmer approved. Starmer signed off. The chamber was utterly stunned. Labour MPs sat motionless, many consciously avoiding eye contact, some quietly, discreetly slipping out of the room, unable to face the accusations. On the Conservative benches, MPs who had once wavered, now erupted with a surge of newfound confidence, sensing with absolute certainty that the end was truly near. The atmosphere inside Parliament was electric, charged with historical significance. The downfall was unfolding in real time, before the eyes of a captivated nation. "Resign, Starmer! Resign!" echoed through Parliament, as the Speaker fought valiantly, desperately, to maintain some semblance of order amidst the pandemonium. Whispers rippled from the SNP, the Liberal Democrats, and even from within Labour's own disillusioned backbenchers. Starmer's leadership was crumbling before their very eyes. Then came the decisive vote. Grim-faced MPs entered the lobbies, their choices sealed, while the entire nation watched, anxiously, from pubs, from factories, and from the quiet sanctity of their homes. The motion passed. Starmer, once hailed as a symbol of unity and renewal for his party, had irrevocably lost Parliament's confidence. A general election, long speculated, was now an absolute certainty. Outside Westminster, the crowds erupted in a joyous, cathartic celebration. Working-class Britons, pensioners, and veterans cheered a moment they had long awaited, a moment of profound vindication. Yet, beneath the elation, lay sobering truths. The country still faced the daunting prospect of financial collapse. Public services were undoubtedly breaking down, and the full, devastating scale of the migrant housing scandal was still only just beginning to emerge. Still, for the first time in many years, a flicker of hope had ignited. That evening, Mr. Farage addressed the nation with steady resolve. "This is only the beginning," he pledged. "We will rebuild Britain with honesty, with courage, and with the British people placed first." Meanwhile, inside Labour HQ, utter chaos unfolded as senior officials began resigning one after another, like dominoes falling. Major donors fled, MPs openly plotted their next moves, and a broken Mr. Starmer silently left Downing Street. Once seen as a beacon of renewal, his leadership had ended in scandal and ignominious disgrace. Now, Britain faces a pivotal question. Should there be a snap election? Should Farage lead the country? Or is another leader waiting in the wings, ready to step forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The fight for Britain's future is just beginning, and the choices made now will undoubtedly shape the nation for generations to come.